A man's knees buckled on the Family Feud stage, and Steve Harvey had to sit down beside him on the steps because he couldn't stand either. In his shaking hands was a folded piece of paper. Not a check, not a prize, a deed. To a house his 5 children had secretly built for him over 2 years, using the exact blueprints he'd drawn on a kitchen table and then quietly put away when the money ran out. But to understand how a game show taping turned into one of the most shared moments in Family Feud history, you need to know who James Dawson actually is. And more importantly, what he gave up so his kids could have a life. It was a regular taping day at the Family Feud studio in Atlanta. Lights up, audience buzzing, Steve in his element. The Dawson family from Memphis, Tennessee, lined up on one side of the stage facing the Carter family from Raleigh, North Carolina. Both families looked ready to play, and from the outside, everything about this episode seemed completely routine. What Steve didn't know, what nobody in that audience knew, was that the Dawson family hadn't come to Atlanta just to play a game. During introductions, Steve walked up to the Dawson side with his trademark grin. "All right, tell me about the Dawson family. James, you're the patriarch here. Tell me about your crew." James put his arm around his eldest daughter, Monique. "Well, Steve, these are my 5 babies. They're not babies anymore, obviously, but they'll always be my babies. I raised them all in Memphis, proud of every single one of them. 5 kids, all grown, all standing tall. Monique, 28, a dental hygienist. Devin, 26, an electrician. Brianna, 24, finishing nursing school. Terrence, 22, just started teaching middle school. And Jasmine, the youngest at 21, a college senior studying social work." Steve was impressed. "That's a full house. And what do you do, James?" "I'm a carpenter. Been doing it about 30 years. Started barely out of high school. I build cabinets, do renovations, some custom furniture when I can get the work." A man who works with his hands. I respect that. Then Steve asked the question that changed the temperature in the room. "Your whole family's here. Is there a Mrs. Dawson we should know about?" James's smile didn't disappear, but it softened into something deeper. "My wife Denise, she passed away when Jasmine here was just 3 years old. So it's been me and the kids for about 18 years now." Steve's whole demeanor shifted. 18 years raising 5 kids on your own. That's something. James shrugged, the way humble men do when they don't want attention. "You do what you've got to do. They needed a parent, and I was the one standing there, so I just figured it out as I went along." But his kids weren't about to let him downplay it. Monique shook her head. "He's being modest, Steve. He worked 2 jobs for most of our childhood. He'd come home from a construction site and help us with homework. He learned how to braid hair from YouTube videos so the girls wouldn't go to school looking crazy." The audience laughed, and James looked embarrassed in the best possible way. "Well, those first few braids were rough, I'll admit." Devin jumped in. "He coached my Little League team, drove us to every practice, every game, never missed a single one of our school events. Not one." "Not one? With 5 kids?" Steve looked stunned. "How is that even possible?" "You make it possible," James said. "When your kids need you, you find a way." So they started playing, and the Dawson family was sharp. They finished each other's thoughts, cheered each other on with a chemistry that only comes from a family that's been through everything together. They won the first round easily and kept building momentum. But what really stood out was how they communicated. When Brianna froze on a question about things people keep in their car, Terrence called out from the end of the line, "You got this, Bri. Think about Dad's truck." And Brianna immediately answered tools, which was the number 3 answer on the board. Steve was clearly enjoying this family. "Y'all are like a well-oiled machine. How are you this in sync?" James grinned. When you grow up in a 3-bedroom apartment with 5 kids and 1 bathroom, you learn to communicate real fast. Steve doubled over. 1 bathroom? 5 kids? Brother, you deserve a medal just for surviving that. The schedule was military precision, Monique said. Dad had a chart on the bathroom door. 15-minute slots. You missed your slot. You were out of luck. During a break, Steve wandered back to the Dawsons, genuinely drawn to their warmth. 5 kids, single dad, working as a carpenter. How did you manage all of that financially? James was honest. There were times I didn't know how I was going to make rent. I picked up every side job I could find. Weekends, evenings, holidays. If somebody needed a shelf built or a deck repaired, I was there. The kids never went without, but there were plenty of times I did. Then Brianna said something that quieted the entire studio. He used to tell us he already ate so there'd be enough for all of us at dinner. We believed him when we were little. It wasn't until I was older that I realized what he was actually doing. James looked at her, surprised. You knew about that? Dad, we all knew, Terrence said gently. We figured it out eventually. You just never wanted us to worry. James blinked it back. That's a parent's job. You don't put that weight on your kids. The stories kept coming between rounds. James taught himself to sew so he could hem their school uniforms instead of paying a tailor. He'd stay up until midnight fixing broken toys rather than admitting they couldn't afford replacements. He once walked 4 miles in the rain to pick up Brianna from a friend's house because the car wouldn't start and he didn't want her to be scared. Jasmine, the quietest of the 5, opened up when Steve asked her about her father. I was so young when Mom passed that I don't really have memories of her. Everything I know about what a family should be, I learned from Dad. He taught me how to ride a bike, how to drive, how to change a tire. He walked me through my first heartbreak. He even went dress shopping with me for prom. He sat in that store for 3 hours, Jasmine laughed, giving opinions on every single dress. I had to make sure my baby girl looked perfect, James said. And she did. He cried when he saw her in the dress she picked, Monique added. I had allergies that day, James said, and the whole studio laughed. The Dawsons made it to Fast Money. Monique and James played together, father-daughter team, and they cleared the threshold. They'd won. The family erupted. James lifted Jasmine off her feet. Devin and Terrence chest bumped so hard they nearly knocked each other over. Brianna was crying happy tears. And Monique stood slightly apart, watching her family with an expression that anyone who knew the secret would have recognized. She was savoring the last calm moment before everything changed. Because the game was over. But the real reason they'd come to Atlanta was just about to begin. As the celebration wound down, Monique walked over to Steve. She looked nervous, purposeful, and her eyes were already filling with tears before she said a word. Steve, can I say something before we finish? Steve glanced at his producer, who gave a subtle nod from the booth. Something had been arranged. Of course, sweetheart. Go ahead. Monique turned to face her father. James was still smiling from the win, his arm around Terrence, completely unaware. Dad, Monique started, her voice already shaking. We didn't just come here to play Family Feud. James's smile faded. What do you mean? All 5 children moved to stand beside Monique, forming a line facing their father. Every one of them had tears in their eyes. Dad, for our whole lives, you've given us everything. You worked yourself to the bone so we could have a childhood. You sacrificed things we didn't even know about until we were old enough to understand. James shifted uncomfortably. Monique, sweetheart, you don't need to. Yes, I do. Because there's something we've been keeping from you. A secret. And it's been 2 years in the making. The audience went dead silent. Devin stepped forward. Dad, do you remember about 7 years ago you started drawing up plans for a house? You had this whole blueprint laid out on the kitchen table. You'd work on it late at night after we went to bed. Something raw flickered across James's face. How did you know about that? I came downstairs for water one night, and you were sitting there with your pencil and your ruler, drawing this house. When I asked you about it the next morning, you said it was nothing, just a hobby. It was nothing, James said quietly. Just a dream I was messing around with. Brianna shook her head. It wasn't nothing, Dad. We found the plans. You designed a 4-bedroom house with a big kitchen because you always said Mom loved to cook and you wished she'd had more counter space. You put a porch on the front because you said every family should have a porch to sit on in the evening. You even drew a little workshop in the back for your carpentry. James was staring at his children, jaw tight, eyes going red. That was just a drawing. I put it away because we couldn't afford it. End quote. Then Terrence said the thing that cracked the room wide open. You put it away because you used the money you'd been saving to pay for my college tuition. I found the bank statements, Dad. You had been saving for years, and when I got into school but the financial aid wasn't enough, you emptied that account without saying a word. James's chin trembled. You weren't supposed to know that. Well, we do, Jasmine said softly. We know about all of it. The savings account, the house plans, the second job you took on Sundays that you told us was volunteer work. We know. Monique reached into her back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Her hands were trembling. Dad, 2 years ago, all 5 of us sat down together and made a decision. We weren't kids anymore. We all had jobs or were close to finishing school, and we decided it was our turn. She handed the paper to James. He took it slowly, hands shaking. What is this? Open it. James unfolded the paper. He stared at it for a long time. Then his knees buckled, and Devin and Terrence had to catch him. Steve moved closer. What is it, James? Tell us what you're looking at. James couldn't speak. His whole body was shaking. Monique turned to Steve with tears streaming down her face. It's a deed, Steve. To a house. His house. We built it. Steve's mouth dropped open. You built it? Devin nodded. Every single one of us contributed. Monique organized the finances. I did the electrical work. Brianna project managed the whole thing while she was in nursing school. Terrence handled the landscaping and painting, and Jasmine found the lot. Jasmine smiled through her tears. It's on Meadow Lane, Dad, 3 streets over from where we grew up. Remember how you always used to drive us past that empty lot and say it was the prettiest spot in the neighborhood? James nodded, still unable to form words. We bought that lot, and we built your house on it. The house from your plans. 4 bedrooms, big kitchen with lots of counter space, a porch on the front, and a workshop in the back. Steve asked the kids how they'd kept this secret for 2 years. Brianna laughed through her tears. It was the hardest thing any of us have ever done. Dad notices everything. We had to come up with so many excuses for where we were on weekends. I told him I joined a book club, Terrence admitted. I've never read a book voluntarily in my life. He definitely thought that was weird. Then they played the video. The studio screen lit up with footage of a craftsman-style home standing on the lot James had driven past for years. Warm gray siding, white trim, a wide front porch with 2 rocking chairs already in place, flower beds lining the walkway, and a mailbox at the curb that read Dawson in hand-painted letters. Inside, hardwood floors caught light from large windows. Then the camera moved to the kitchen, and James let out a sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Granite countertops, an island with bar stools, and beautiful handcrafted cabinets. Those are Shaker-style cabinets, he whispered. That's my design. Devin built them, Monique said. He learned cabinet making, just so he could build those for you. Took him 6 months. Devin shrugged, trying to play it cool, eyes red. You always said good cabinets make a kitchen. I wanted to make sure they were right. James looked at his son. They're perfect. They're absolutely perfect. The video showed 4 bedrooms, each painted a different color. Sage green for Monique, navy blue for Devin, soft yellow for Brianna, gray for Terrence, lavender for Jasmine, each one theirs for when they visit. There's only 4 bedrooms, James said, brow furrowing. There's 5 of you. The 5th bedroom is yours, Dad. Master suite, its own bathroom, and a big window facing east, so you get the morning sun. We know you like the morning sun. Then the camera moved to the backyard, a fully equipped woodworking shop, separate from the house. New tools, a professional workbench, and a sign above the door that read Dawson & Sons Carpentry. Devin and Terrence want to learn the trade, Monique said. They want you to teach them. And daughters, Brianna added. You promised to teach me dovetail joints when I was 12, and you never got around to it. James managed a small laugh. I remember that. Well, now you've got the workshop to do it in. Then the video zoomed in on something hanging inside the workshop, a smaller sign that read, Built with Love by the Dawson 5, for the man who built us. And underneath it, a framed photograph of Denise Dawson, their mother, young and beautiful and smiling, placed where James would see it every time he walked through that door. We wanted Mom to be in the house too, Jasmine said quietly, so she's in the place we knew you'd spend the most time. That was the moment that truly undid him. James pulled all 5 of his children into him at once, wrapping his arms around as many as he could reach. Steve took off his glasses and wiped his eyes. The audience was on their feet. When James finally pulled back, his face was a mess, but he was smiling. The biggest, most unguarded smile he'd probably worn in years. "I don't deserve this," he said. "Stop it," Monique said firmly. "You deserve this and so much more." Steve asked him, "When you put those house plans away all those years ago, did you ever think you'd see that house built?" James shook his head. "No. I accepted it. That house was a dream. And dreams are nice. But my kids needed real things. Food. And clothes. And school supplies. And a father who was present. The house didn't matter. But it did matter," Devin said. "It was the one thing you wanted for yourself. The only thing. And you gave it up without a second thought so we could have what we needed. You never complained. You never even mentioned it again." "That's what fathers do," James said simply. The Carter family came over from their side of the stage, every one of them in tears. Mrs. Carter hugged James, then hugged each Dawson child one by one. Her husband Ray, a retired firefighter, shook James's hand. "Man to man, what you did for these kids is the most important work any man can do." Before the families left, Monique pulled Steve aside with one more thing. The house was fully paid off, no mortgage. They'd saved and pooled everything. And the workshop? Devin already had 3 clients lined up. People in the neighborhood who'd heard what the family was doing and wanted to hire James. He was going to walk into that workshop and have work waiting for him. Steve just stared at her. "Monique, how old were you when your mama passed?" 10. "And you've been looking out for your family ever since." "He looked out for us first. We're just returning the favor." Before they left the stage, Steve had one more quiet moment with James. He spoke low enough that the audience had to strain to hear. "James, I grew up without a lot. My family didn't have much, and I know what it's like to watch someone sacrifice for you and not have the words to say what that means." He paused. "What your kids did today building that house, it's incredible. But what you did for 18 years to make them the kind of people who would even think to do something like that, that's the real miracle. Houses are just wood and nails. What you built inside those 5 people is forever." James pulled him into a hug, and the audience gave one final, thunderous ovation. As the Dawson family walked off stage together, James in the middle with his children surrounding him, he stopped at the edge and turned back to look at the set, then down at the deed, then up at his 5 kids. "Let's go see our house," he said. "Our house," Monique corrected gently. "Your house, Dad." "No," James said firmly, putting his arms around the 2 children closest to him. "Ours. Everything I have is ours. That's how it's always been." When the episode aired, it became one of the most shared clips in Family Feud history. The moment James unfolded that deed and his legs gave out was replayed millions of times. People shared their own stories of single parents who sacrificed everything, of children who found ways to give back. Steve later said in an interview, "That man didn't build cabinets for a living. He built people. He built 5 incredible human beings with nothing but his 2 hands and his whole heart. And then those 5 people turned around and built him the house he always dreamed of." The house on Meadow Lane became the place where the Dawson family gathered for every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday dinner. James sat on that front porch every evening, watching the neighborhood go by, thinking about how a drawing on a kitchen table turned into 4 walls and a roof and a life he never thought he'd have. One evening, as the fireflies came out over Memphis, James sat on the porch with Monique beside him. "You know what I love most about this porch?" he said. "What's that, Dad?" "There's room for everyone. Always has been. Even when we didn't have much, there was always room." Monique leaned her head on her father's shoulder. "There always will be, Dad. That's the house you built. Not this one. The one inside all of us." James smiled and rocked his chair. The evening was warm, the house was solid, and his family was close. For a man who'd spent 18 years making sure everyone else was taken care of, he had finally been taken care of himself.